Hello and welcome back to another episode of Armchair Analysts, the only podcast that thinks managers should take part in penalty shootouts. My name is Cameron McDonald, and I've spent 3 years working as an FA licensed intermediary here in the UK. My co-host Rupert Meadows has written and broadcasted about all things football on platforms such as TalkSport Radio and Give Me Sport. But above all else, we're fans.
Yeah, thanks for that, Cam, and thanks to you guys. This is episode 52, which means we've been putting these out for a whole year today.
Whey!
Way indeed. We'll get right into the football, but just wanted to say a quick thanks for listening, and we hope you keep enjoying them all.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. And now, what have we got this week?
So, I think this one pretty much writes itself, as match day 1 of Euro 2020 is coming to a close, and the tournament has not let us down so far. We'll be taking a look at which side's got it right, which side's got it wrong, and a player to watch out for from each of the 6 groups. As always, timestamps are in the description, and kicking us off with some controversy. Has anything surprised you yet? And what's your rogue shout for the tournament, Cam?
Well, you know that I love a good rogue shout. I know you love one as well, so I'm really excited to get into that. But surprises, the 2 main things that have surprised me about this tournament so far, and I know we're only in the sort of first match day, but the 2 things that have slightly surprised me is, firstly, we've not really had any shocking upsets. We've had like a few games where there've been sort of like late draws, like Wales-Switzerland was maybe one, or Spain-Sweden was another one the other day, but we haven't had sort of any big giant killings or really upset, games that you didn't expect to go that way in a million years. So I think that's quite interesting because it's often in these international tournaments, the first round of games, where you sort of get that splash of cold water, realising that everyone sort of overrated one team or underrated another. And the other thing that's been a really nice surprise is that we haven't really had any VAR controversy yet, to the best of my knowledge, unless I'm sort of skipping over on something. For the most part, VAR has gone off without a hitch, which on the one hand is great to see in a tournament, and on the other hand is really damning towards Premier League referees. Yeah,
true, absolutely right. I mean, obviously, any sort of thing is going to be an indictment on Premier League referees, and we just can't keep pretending, not that I don't think anyone is anymore, that we've got a good system here, because clearly it's not. I think you're right. There haven't been too many shocking upsets. I would say that, Italy and Netherlands probably have looked the sharpest of any team so far, and obviously that's not surprising because they're always going to be in contention for the major accolades as some of the biggest footballing nations in the world. But I guess I've been slightly surprised at how, I'd say, they've just come out and looked pretty strong. Italy especially, I didn't imagine, they've kind of fallen under the radar for me a little bit. And they just look really solid in their 3-0 win against Turkey.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Both of those teams are sort of massive historic nations, and it's almost sort of like the surprise is what they've been up to for the last sort of 6-7 years, if they've not been as good as they sort of usually are. And now, at least from this first round of games, it looks like they're back to the peak of their powers.
Well, we shall see about peak of their powers, but definitely, they've started pretty
back to
well,
winning ways,
obviously.
at least.
Yeah, definitely. And then I would say the other thing that's surprised me, and this might be, I mean, feel free to tell me I'm wrong, but I would say it's more of an observation, but it feels like this tournament is going to rely a lot less on tactics and more on physicality. I don't know if that's because players around Europe will maybe be a little bit more mentally drained than normal because it's been such a weird couple of years, and maybe they've not been able to travel with their squads as much, they've not been able to train as a squad as much as a national team. But I don't know, it just feels like we've seen so far already some really dominant, aggressive attacking play being rewarded. Players like, I guess, Switzerland's Imbolo look really powerful. Wales's George up front, Lukaku, obviously, Patrick Schick, even someone like Netherlands' like Depay, look really powerful in his direct running. So I don't know, that's just something else that's kind of felt like a little bit of something that I've noticed.
Yeah, I think the physicality thing is definitely true. It's been a bit of a big striker summer. We've got like loads of really tall strikers doing really well in the tournament at the moment, which is just quite enjoyable, and definitely a few that we'll be talking about in this episode. Rogue shout for the tournament. Have you got a good rogue shout, or do you want me to start off?
I've got an interesting one. I mean, you might tell me that this is kind of boring, but I quite like it. My rogue shout of this tournament is Spain are not going to make it out of the group stages.
You know what's crazy is I'm looking at my notes and that's exactly what I've gone for rogue shoot. Spain to go out in the groups.
That's your rogue shout as well.
That is also my. This was not pre-planned, by the way.
Is that actually?
It is, yeah. No, I agree. I really don't fancy them as a team. And it's one of those things where Group E, we talked about this last episode, how if England finish first, they'll play the sort of second place team from Group F, and if they finish second, they'll play the second place team from Group E. Yes. And it's one of those things that I've been looking at Group E quite closely as well, and I've been really impressed with the quality of defending from all the sides. Obviously, we saw Sweden sort of hold that 0-0 against Spain, and in the Poland-Slovakia game, although it was a 2-1, it had to be sort of broken open by moments of individual brilliance because both of them had really strong blocks.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that part of it is because, Spain have crashed out of major tournaments before in recent memory. The one in 2014, going out in the group stages with that iconic loss to the Netherlands being the one that sticks in the mind. But the main statistic that I saw that worried me was that they had 75% possession in this game, the highest percentage of any team that's played so far. And with that, were able to create very few chances, and really the only good one was one which they didn't create. It was just handed to them by Sweden from a defensive error, and one which Alvaro Morata completely folded on. So, yeah, I just feel like it's a really bloated squad. They've got loads of good midfielders, no real attacking firepower, and their defense doesn't look exceptional. So yeah, that's funny that we picked the same thing.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna be great when they do go through top of the group. No, but I definitely agree. They don't have a lot of attacking quality. A lot of their games are probably going to play out in a similar fashion to the Sweden game. I did think of the Sweden game. Sweden had a goal cleared off the line, the Alexander Isak one that got cleared off by Marcus Llorente. And then you look at some of the selections that have been made. Marcus Llorente, who's been starting at right back, he started at right back in this game. He's a midfielder, and you've got Azpilicueta, who's a right back that's just started in the final of the Champions League and won it, was sat on the bench. Gerard Moreno, who has done really well in La Liga this season and obviously played for that Villarreal side that won the Europa League, was left out in favour of Alvaro Morata, who had an absolute stinker. Pedri, who has had a pretty good season for Barcelona, but is 18 years old, he's pretty raw. He's been started over players like Thiago Silva and Pablo Sarabia. So, yeah, there's just a lot of different things, and above all, they just don't really look like they're on the same wavelength to me, and that's something that definitely could change over the course of the groups, but it just doesn't seem like everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you that it seems like a team without a collective identity, and you just do need that kind of almost like hive mindset if you're ever going to do well in a tournament like this, and it's something that they've really, had in spades in the past, and they haven't really had that same magic ever since, I would say, 2014. So there you go. Those are our combined takes.
I'm funny that we've agreed on that. I was expecting you to go for like a weird winner or another like top team to get knocked out, but yeah, we've both locked in on Spain. Moving into Group A. So the way we're going to be doing this for you listeners, we're going to be going through the groups, looking at some of the games, and Rupert and I are going to take turns to pick out a player that we suggest everyone watch out for because they're a great player, and hopefully it's not someone that everyone's heard of. The player that I've gone for to watch out for in Group A is a player I've talked about on the podcast before. He's a player I really like, and that's Italy's Domenico Berardi. We talked about him back in the winter transfers episode, I believe, and we were talking about sort of Premier League teams that could strengthen by bringing someone in. And Berardi's one of those players that I've always really considered to be a bit like a Mario Balotelli or like a Ross Barkley as well, who has like little glimpses every now and again of world-class talent, but's never had the right platform to do it consistently. He's done really, really well in Serie A this season for Sassuolo, and now that he's coming into this Italy team that is looking really, really good, I think this could be a tournament where he has a bit like James Rodriguez for Colombia back in the 2014 World Cup, just really show off with a team that's a little bit more imperious than Sassuolo. I think just he's so versatile in terms of what he can do in that front three. He plays as a forward, he plays as a winger, he can even play as an attacking midfielder, and it just means that you don't know what he's going to do when he has the ball coming into the final third, because he is equally capable of sort of drifting wide and firing an across, which he did to sort of create the opening goal of the tournament. He could drive through himself and have a go on goal, or he could make a killer pass. So he is one of those players that anytime he's starting, anytime he's on the ball, really worth watching. And I think if Italy do have a great tournament, he's going to be one of the key players in that effort.
Yeah, definitely. I think, just he's got such a stable career in that he's been, at his club Sassuolo since 2010 as a youth player, and just, really looks like he is going to be one of the mainstays of that side. So yeah, I definitely back that decision. And as we said, Italy are going to be an exciting team to look out for throughout the tournament.
Well, into the games. I mean, Italy have sort of become like they're the popular option for people to say like an outside shout now. They're sort of like they're not even the outside shout anymore because so many people have gone like, oh, Italy could do it, and then obviously that helped when they kicked off the tournament with such a good win 3-0. And I've seen a lot of people saying of this game, like, oh, it's only Turkey, like, it's not that big a deal. But Turkey are not a bad side at the moment. They've got a lot of top players who played for Burak Yilmaz, Zeki Çelik, and Yusuf Sisigi, all played for Lille when they won Ligue 1. Çalhanoğlu plays for Milan. Soyuncu, of course, we know from Leicester in the Prem, and Oke Yokuşlu joined West Brom on loan and was one of the few players this season when you were watching West Brom at the back end who you would go, he's actually pretty good. So, firstly, Turkey, I think, are quite an interesting side. Also, I think the fact that Italy beat them 3-0 isn't just, oh, Turkey are bad, but it's just Italy were really dominant in this game. And it took them a while to break Turkey down. The first half was goalless, but once they got into that game, the floodgates just opened.
Yeah, and it feels like, as you said, like the floodgates opened, their attack was kind of really starting to click towards the end of that second half, and they look like someone that's ready to, like really push on and make that their statement game to start this tournament with a bang. So yeah, like it.
It's just interestingly, because this is something that when I was thinking about all these games, and it came up a lot when I was watching these games, quite a few of these games started really slowly, and then like either in the second half or like 60 minutes in, everything sort of fell into place. And I was wondering why that was. Do you think that that's maybe just a symptom of international tournaments? And so, like, most of these players either haven't really played together for a while or they've played, like, 1 or 2 friendlies. And so it is literally, you can almost see the pieces falling into place. Because it was the same here. It was the same, sort of a little bit for the Netherlands, Netherlands versus Ukraine game, which obviously had 5 goals, but no goals in the first half. There was another one that was a really good game that sort of didn't quite get going until the second half. And even the ones that did that, not necessarily with the goals. I just found that a lot of these games took a while to sort of open up.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think maybe the other thing just to mention is that there are a lot of young players in this tournament this year. There are even a couple of new sides that have, not had many run-outs in major tournaments. So there'll be a lot of nerves flying around, and there'll be a lot of kind of nervousness at the beginning, a little bit of hesitancy, maybe not feeling like they're fully settled in their teams, as you say. And not surprising that it just take them a moment or two to really build into it, which I guess is also why someone like Italy can really capitalise, because they are a slightly more established team. Someone like Netherlands have played together for a decent amount of time, whereas teams that you only have one player in each team across Europe maybe will struggle a little bit more.
Struggle to find that chemistry. I think Italy, the other thing that's worth sort of noting about them as we sort of move through this tournament, there's a few teams like this. England's not one of them, but Italy could potentially have a really nice draw for the round of 16 because Group A, whoever finishes first, plays the second place team from Group C, which is a group consisting of the Netherlands, Ukraine, Austria, and North Macedonia. Probably the Netherlands win that group, so it means you're playing probably either Ukraine or Austria, which is one of the better draws, you'd probably say.
Yeah, true. I mean, Austria, I think, can probably surprise anyone in this tournament. They look, again, like quite a solid one. But yeah, I agree with that for sure. One to look out for. Let's move into Wales versus Switzerland to top off Group A.
Well, yeah, Wales versus Switzerland was another one of those games where it was a player who I've really liked for ages, Breel Mbolo. He's one of those guys that feels like he's been around forever, despite the fact that he's 24, because he's been playing for such a long time. And he's always been another one of those players that's always sort of threatened to be good, but he's never quite had that enormous move. He plays for Mönchengladbach at the moment, but there's always been sort of a thought that he could move to the Prem or a big European side, or a bigger European side anyway, and it sort of never really materialised. And this is, I've only seen him play live a few times, but this was definitely the best game I'd ever seen him. Sort of Switzerland were kind of struggling in the first half, and this was another one where he came out after the break and was just like, right, Haris Seferovic is not going to give me any help. I'm just going to pick up the ball from midfield and just run through like 10 Welsh players and have a shot. And he just absolutely ran that game. And the only reason that Switzerland didn't win that game was because Mbolo was the second best player on the pitch. The best player on the pitch was Danny Ward in between the sticks for Wales.
He really did have an unbelievable game. And yeah, what an amazing stop was it in the second half? Yeah, to stop Mbolo.
I'd take your pick. There were so many.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting game actually. I quite enjoyed it because this is one where obviously these teams where haven't really played each other many times, they have such different squads that to put them together in this tournament format is fun to just be. Do you know what I mean? Just watch it and see what happens. Because I personally did not know what was going to happen from this game, and I almost quite liked the fact that someone like Gareth Bale didn't dominate it. I quite liked the fact that Aaron Ramsey was good, but not wildly effective. What we really saw was players like, I don't know, Kiefer Moore standing out, and Danny Ward, as you mentioned, Joe Roden at the back as well, had a great match. So yeah, I enjoyed that.
I mean, the heroes for Wales were Danny Ward and whoever their set-piece coach is, basically. Because, obviously, Kiefer Moore scored that goal, but it was one of those things, it was like the whole game, you knew that it was one of those things where you knew that if he was going to score a goal, it was going to be that kind of goal, but you couldn't really do anything about it. And it was a great little bit of a routine coming off that corner, a few nice passes, and then a great cross into it. And it was one of those goals I watched, I was like, I bet Sean Dyche is sitting at home right now salivating.
You are probably not far off.
But yeah, no, a great game from both teams. Really exciting stuff, and interesting to see, which one of these teams comes second in the group, or indeed which team comes first. If any of them can give Italy a bit of a bloody nose, because I think all of them have played a good sort of style of football that I'm interested to see more of so far.
Yeah, it's cool because you look at both of those teams and you just think either one could have a smash and grab win against Italy. I agree with that.
Looking at Group B, who is your player to watch out for from this group?
So I have kind of based this off, I guess, the results, at least in part, because we're looking at these groups having seen them play a game all. And obviously Denmark had a tough game against Finland because of Christian Eriksen, and I don't think anyone in the world can begrudge them that. It must have been so hard mentally just to even be able to string some passes together, let alone put together a performance that's going to win you an international match. But Belgium kind of took apart Russia quite comfortably, but I wouldn't say that any of their players are players that we don't know about. So I'm going to pick a Finnish player just because they did get 3 points against Denmark and they could well finish second in the group.
Definitely good.
There are a couple of key players that came out of it. Obviously, Hradecki, the goalkeeper, was always going to be a really important player for them, and he had a great game. Ara Jury as well looked really good in defence, and I think Finland had the most tackles of any team so far in the tournament. So that defensive solidity is going to be really important. The player that I've chosen to kind of highlight is someone that we know his name very well, but less in a footballing sense and more for what has happened elsewhere in the game, which is Glenn Kamara.
Right, yeah, no, good pick. And already actually one who's had a lot of interest from Premier League clubs this summer, I believe. Definitely.
I mean, I think it looks like 4 or 5 clubs are all going to be competing for his signature, and he is kind of that engine room in a very impressive Rangers side this year. And I think that obviously, Finland's defence is going to be really crucial, as I mentioned, if they're going to progress anywhere. But I think to be able to screen that defence well and to take the pressure off them, and also to start attacks from deep, and to, I guess, just really control the tempo of the game and make sure that Finland aren't just like defending for 90 minutes the whole way through. I think Kamara is really going to be the linchpin that could well decide how good a tournament they have in the end.
Yeah, very true. Looking at the game, it was a sort of a weird one to talk on because obviously, as you say, Finland did get the 3 points. They beat Denmark 1-0, but the game was sort of massively overshadowed by Christian Eriksen's collapse. And I just wanted to ask, a few of your thoughts about this because obviously, just to start off, first and foremost, the good news is that he's stable. He came out with an Instagram post earlier today saying that he was fine under the circumstances. So that was great to hear because there was a horrific period of time where you just feared the worst. And the other thing that was really great to see was that, it's been a time recently for a lot of football fans of, not necessarily being proud of your community. So it was great to see football fans united throughout the rest of the game. The Finnish fans were chanting Christian and the Danish fans would reply Eriksen. Seeing Eriksen's teammates being fantastic. Simon Kjær may well have saved his life by putting him in the recovery position and all of his teammates surrounding him to protect his dignity. So loads and loads of good stuff to absolutely love about that. The stuff that you have to ask about that's a little bit more nasty. It's things like, you alluded to there, Denmark would have found it hard to even string a few passes together. Should that game have been restarted? I mean, the Danish manager has come out and said it shouldn't have been. Peter Schmeichel has come out and called it absolutely ridiculous. The players were visibly distraught at the restart. And Denmark went on to lose that from that point, and it was the goal that they conceded was a really bad mistake from Kasper Schmeichel, and then they had a penalty from Højbjerg, who was really unconvincing. And normally that's the kind of thing you'd say, how have you lost focus there? But how can you expect them to have been focused? What did you think about that?
I think it's an impossible situation. I agree that the match shouldn't have taken place immediately afterwards. I can imagine the logistical nightmare of trying to reschedule it was such that they just didn't feel like it was going to be possible. But it does feel like the main thing I would say is it doesn't feel like Denmark were consulted. It doesn't feel like they took the managers into one room, or the chairman of the FA of each country, for example, and just said like, look, how do we move through this together? I don't think that happened. I think it was a decision made by the tournament leaders rather than one with respect to the teams themselves. So yeah, I agree. I don't think it should have happened because this is obviously such a shocking incident, and I don't know about you, but I actually kind of was surprised at how emotional I felt about it. I was talking to a friend of mine our close friend Will, who is like a massive, massive fan of Christian Eriksen, but I was kind of quite emotional about it. It hit me hard, as I'm sure it hit a lot of people hard, and I just think the game should not have taken place after that.
But perfectly normal. I think everyone was sort of hit very hard by it emotionally. It was just a very full-on situation, and just a shame that it's a situation now that at least he's stable, but Denmark have sort of had this result as a result of it, and obviously that's the least important thing in the situation, but it just still kind of sucks.
Of course, and I mean their tournament could well be over now, just because
on that basis.
And in that sense, you can't really say that that's a result of Christian Eriksen, going down in the way that he did. It's a result of the fact that they were forced to play that game.
Exactly. It just seemed like one of those things that, like, down the line, people will look back and go, Jesus Christ, that's the care afforded to these players who've just had this really traumatic incident. But
it's really bad. I mean, I just think that at least hold yourself accountable to the sense that, like, publish the notes of the meeting that you had, talking about it and saying, like, we actually tried really hard to make this game happen at a different time, but it couldn't happen because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Like, I could understand that if that was the case, and I would say just like, fair enough, but it was what it was, and it's really sad. But I don't know, obviously we're not going to get that transparency, and you do just always wonder how much effort was made and what could have been done differently.
For sure. Looking at the next game of the group, which, as you mentioned there, was Belgium winning 3-0 against the Russian Federation. And yeah, one of the other surprises that I had about this tournament, when you sort of talk about surprises, is that I don't know if this is just because Belgium are so accepted to be a good team, but people just haven't really been talking that much about Belgium. Like, even earlier when we were talking about Italy, Netherlands, I don't know if it's just because everyone sort of assumes that Belgium will do well, but everyone's sort of been going like, oh, Italy could be a bit of a dark horse, but we haven't really had that much about Belgium, despite the fact that they've got a really, really solid team. They've got a relatively forgiving group. If they finish first, much like Italy, they'll play a potentially easy draw, because if they finish first, they'll play one of the third place teams that make it through. So in theory, one of the easier draws. And they dominated this game without Kevin De Bruyne in the squad and with Eden Hazard not playing for the majority of the game. So it seems a bit weird to me maybe that there aren't more people. The sort of the popular call is saying like France or Portugal are going to win it, and then the sort of dark horse one is Italy or the Netherlands. People aren't really talking about Belgium. I don't know if you agree with that though.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that they're being slept on a little bit just because, Kevin De Bruyne has been out injured. Axel Witsel, also, quite key to their midfield balance, has been out injured. Eden Hazard's kind of completely off the ball at the moment at a club level. So a lot of their key players are just not really coming to a good vein of form at the right time for them. So I think, not really much has been made for them. But the fact that you can still start with a front three of like Dries Mertens, Yannick Carrasco and Romelu Lukaku is testament to how much firepower they have, and how strong they look. I mean, again, Timothy Castagne comes off injured, and to be able to replace him with Thomas Meunier is also, just exceptional. So I agree with you. I think that they also look like they could well finally, make the most of their incredible talent and golden generation and go far.
It's quite funny because they have. It's not a like for like, but they have quite a similar squad composition to England. They have like attacking depth coming out of their ears, and then the defense is like sort of iffy, and then they also have like a like abundance of good right backs as well, as you said there with that whole sort of Castagna Munya thing. It's quite funny how similar they are.
Very funny, yeah, and also just weird, like Thorgan Hazard playing at wing back. Very strange.
Right.
At least for me to see. I mean, to be fair to the lad, he had a great game and showed his versatility, but would you not just put Meunier on the left? I don't know.
Yeah.
Who's to say?
You would have thought. Group C, the player I have gone to watch out for in this group is a player from the Netherlands team, and that's Wout Weghorst. We were talking earlier about sort of Memphis Depay and how impressive everyone's expecting him to be and how impressive he's already been. But I want to talk about the other lad they had up front and who did score, Wout Weghorst. He is a really impressive striker. He's scored 45 goals for Wolfsburg over the last 2 seasons. He's got really good link-up play in the final third. I think one of the things I'm most excited about him is him in relation to Memphis Depay as an attacking prospect. I think a big part of Memphis Depay's effectiveness is going to be down to the combination that they're going to strike up together up front. And Weghorst is 6'6". They sort of have that almost little and large thing going on. Depay's going to be able to play the ball off him and run forward, or he's going to be able to whip balls into Weghorst. He scored a great goal in the Netherlands opening game, and he's just one of those strikers that I imagine if you're a defender, you hate to play against him because he's just like powering along. He's like 4 inches taller than most of you, and he's really good at finishing.
Yeah, true. I mean, he's the kind of player that if you switch off for even a moment, he'll be behind you, he'll be on top of you, towering above you in the air. Yeah, absolutely. You would hate to play against him. He seems to always kind of be on the move as well, a little bit harassing defenders. So, yeah, really, really nifty little player they've got there.
Definitely, indeed. And moving into Netherlands 3-2 Ukraine, the highest scoring game of the tournament so far. And like I mentioned earlier, another high scoring game where the goals didn't come until the second half. The Netherlands were doing really well, but things weren't quite clicking in the first half, and the Ukraine weren't doing that well at all in the first half. They were sort of a little bit passengers in this game, and then they came in really hard for a little period towards the back end of the game. And I thought it was very interesting that it was only once the Netherlands had scored their second goal that Ukraine were able to get into the game, largely because I was like, some pundit somewhere has uttered my least favourite adage in football, which is that 2-0 is the most dangerous score in football line. But I did enjoy this game, and I thought it was a great one because Andriy Yarmolenko is such a funny player. Like, do you remember when he first sort of made his way onto the global landscape? It was because he played
for Dortmund, or
before that, he played for Ukraine against England like 2 or 3 times in a relatively short period. And everyone was sort of going, oh, like, this guy's actually really good. I don't think he ever scored, but he like just ran the wing for one game and everyone was like, oh, it's crazy. And then he played more centrally and everyone was like, oh, and everyone was sort of linking him to all these clubs in the Prem. And he ended up going to Dortmund and it didn't really work out. And then he's gone to West Ham where he's been alright, but he doesn't really start now. And then he's just come back and the goal he scored, the confidence and like the technique, I was like, that's world class. Someone should sign him. And I was like, no wait, we've been through this before.
At least twice, yeah.
But his scoring record for Ukraine, 41 goals in 95 games. For a guy who's predominantly a winger, that's insane.
It's incredibly impressive. And I mean, the weird part for me was that I didn't even realise he was Ukraine's captain. So, he's clearly got a massive presence in that dressing room. As you said, a really impressive set of statistics internationally. And yeah, it does feel like he kind of puts on his different international hat and, maybe ties his shoelaces the other way around this time and I don't know, flip a coin before he takes to the pitch. Yeah, it does seem quite bizarre.
It was just fantastic. And yeah, Ukraine got back into it. They did really, really well. And then unfortunately for them, the Netherlands sort of got back into it again and Denzel Dumfries scored the winner. I do think that the Netherlands maybe stumbled a little bit in this game in sort of failing to put its bed and getting a bit complacent, but I do still think they are one of the most dangerous teams in this competition, potentially.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Yarmolenko's goal really did just disrupt the run of play because Netherlands were looking really dominant. Gini Wijnaldum was running the midfield quite comfortably, I would say. And then suddenly, out of the blue, comes his goal, and then they get back into it with a quick second. So yeah, I agree that obviously you kind of have to look at it as a bit of a flaw to have let them back into the game, but I also think that, the way the momentum of the match turned on its head at that goal out of the blue point, I don't fault them too much for it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair analysis. Wrapping us off for the first half of the groups with Austria versus North Macedonia, which was a 3-1 game, and there are two main reasons I want to talk about this game. Firstly, all of the goals were so entertaining and for different reasons, and I thought that was really so funny for a game that was between a side that have never won at the Euros and a side that had never been to the Euros.
No, I know, and it was a great game to watch, and the passion of the North Macedonia fans and players was great to see, and really nice to see Austria do well. They're definitely a side who have individual players that I really like. But as I'm sure the next thing we're going to get into, which is going to be the Arnautovic incident, a shame that it was marred by such a strange moment.
Yeah, it was really weird because all of the goals that Austria scored were great, and Macedonia's was just great comedy, but all of theirs were great. And Arnautovic sort of came on, scored the goal that was basically confirmed to put the game to bed because it took him from 2-1 to 3-1. And I was thinking, he's going to be absolutely buzzing here. And he was just furious, and he was visibly extremely angry. And then loads of his teammates were running over to him to one of them was sort of almost strangling him to calm him down, and then Alaba was grabbing his face. And I was like, what's happening here? And then he came out today, after all that angry outburst, and he said, I am not a racist. There were some heated words yesterday in the emotions of the game for which I would like to apologise, especially to my friends from North Macedonia and Albania. Which is a statement of two halves. He said that first bit, and then he said something that would infer that first bit isn't untrue.
Yeah, I mean, it's any sentence that you start with "I'm not a racist," you're already in some real dangerous territory.
He's not even gone for the Andre Kudela I'm not a racist, I didn't say that. He's I'm not a racist, and then he's but I did say something that I would want to apologise to these specific groups of people for. And I was like, isn't that?
I mean, I think his bizarre argument seems to be that what he said in the heat of the moment does not reflect his values. But at that point, you have to admit that even if you don't think of yourself as racist, your behaviour was at least racist.
That's just bro, what a weird statement. But other than that,
super bizarre. And I guess apparently he's a Serbian father and doesn't recognise North Macedonia, and thank God they didn't play Kosovo.
Not really what you want to see in an international tournament, unlike Austria's first goal, which I feel they were really unlucky that Czech Republic scored the goal that they did, Patrick Schick, because otherwise Stefan Leiner, I thought that was lined up to be the goal of the tournament. It was the kind of goal that reminds me of Zlatan Ibrahimovic, the acrobatic leap, and then he sort of knocks it in across the keeper. I thought it was great.
It was pretty spectacular, wasn't it?
I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Loved it. Loved these goals, and I hope that both these teams continue to score goals like this. Shall we move into Eustace Trivia before we go into Group D and England?
Yes, please. Let's do it. After you.
So my Eustace Trivia this week is about one of the teams that we're about to talk about. This is a Eustace Trivia fact called McScotland, and that is that at their first ever Euros game in 1992, Scotland started with 7 Mcs, with McKimmie, McPherson, McAllister, McCall, McStay, McClare and McCoist. Now, unfortunately, they're down to just 2 in the starting 11, McTominay and McGinn.
Just those 2, wow. You hate to see them go, don't you?
I know. As a McDonald, I feel like my culture's being destroyed.
It is a sad day in the Scotland camp.
What have you got for us?
That is a good one. So I have a funny little moment about Cristiano Ronaldo, who set a new record in his appearance today against Hungary by becoming the first ever player to play in 5 different Euros, from 2004 all the way to 2020, brackets, asterisk 2021. He made headlines off the pitch this week by removing some Coke bottles off the press conference table before his interview, acting visibly annoyed they were there in the first place and saying that water is more important. This Coke sponsorship of the Euros comes in a long line of bizarre, from my perspective, relationships between things like major sports events and their sponsorships, which saw, I guess McDonald's sponsored the Olympics for over 50 years. But what gets weirder is that dig a little deeper and you realise that Cristiano Ronaldo is sponsored by Pepsi. So he can't really argue that, oh, I really just don't believe in this brand. I think we should be drinking water instead. So that has been something that I saw appear in just one article, and no one else is really talking about it. But then you get one stage even deeper, which no one is making the connection for between at the moment, which is that in 2012, Cristiano Ronaldo was actually sponsored by Coca-Cola, and he lost his $750,000 sponsorship because he was seen entering a press conference sipping a Pepsi.
Jesus Christ, how deep does this rabbit hole go? I saw, because I saw obviously this clip of him removing the Coca-Cola bottles, and one of the pictures that someone it was on Twitter, had responded with underneath, it was a picture of Ronaldo in a Coca-Cola advert, and it was sort of like a hypocrite thing. Didn't know the Pepsi connection. What I have also read today, quite interestingly, is that since Ronaldo did that, there's been a $4 billion drop in the share price of Coca-Cola. $4 billion.
Yeah, it lost a penny per share, I think, was the impact of it. To be fair, I personally, take away whatever the Pepsi crap is going on in the background, I am really here for that happening, because I hate this like alignment of these just really bad health brands trying to pretend that they are in some way, good for you by associating themselves with these kind of competitions. So, yes, this is great. Down with Coke sponsoring things like the Euros. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. Fundamentally disagree with it. And B, there's some sketchy shit going on in the background, man.
The funny thing with that spot, because I do agree the sponsor thing's quite funny in terms of, like the McDonald's in the Olympics, or Cadbury's another one, or even I suppose you could say with like beers and stuff, like when Budweiser or Heineken sponsor something. It is always quite weird, and you kind of like wonder like where the line is. Like, surely they could never be like, the Marlboro Premier League.
Well, you say that. I mean, I guess maybe not cigarettes, because they have had some pretty hefty sanctions slapped on them for what they can and can't advertise for. I mean, I don't think you can legally advertise for cigarettes on the TV anymore or something like that. Or in magazines. I'm not sure exactly what the rulings are, but they do have things that they can't do. Yeah, I personally think that, I don't know, it maybe shouldn't be a rule, but I feel like the Euros should be maybe a little bit disappointed in themselves for allowing themselves to be sponsored by that, and not, I don't know, Lucozade. Just take Lucozade. Be happy with, like, I don't know.
I look forward to the 2024 Euros press conference when Cristiano Ronaldo is like removing a pack of Lambert and Butlers off this press conference table, and he's like, "Hey guys, vape instead." And we find out that he's sponsored by Juul.
Oh God. The dystopian future scape continues. I'm worried at how visual that imagery is. I can very readily imagine it.
Looking at Group D before we go into the games, who have you selected as the player to watch out for in this group?
So, I think again, just because of how the I guess the results panned out so far, I felt like the team to watch in this group is Czech Republic, just because England have beaten Croatia. We know England's side relatively well. We kind of said to ourselves we weren't going to pick anyone from the Premier League for this, and I can't in good conscience pick out Jadon Sancho, who didn't even play a minute against Croatia. So looking at Czech Republic, and I guess there are a couple of players who really stood out, but the main one has got to be Patrick Schick, just because of the impact that he had on last game. And the thing I want to highlight about him is how well the Czech Republic look like they are setting up to support his strengths, which is that he's a decently clinical striker who's good in the air. And he's really going to profit from having the likes of Kufal at right back, who look really dominant up and down that right hand side, and put in the cross.
He got the assist for the first goal, didn't he?
For his goal, yeah, exactly. And the other player who's going to be key for Czech Republic as they move forward is their attacking midfielder Derrida.
Vladimir Derrida.
Yeah, he averaged an assist every 4 games of the Bundesliga last season. Very much has an eye for a through ball. And yeah, it's just going to be a really exciting team as they try and funnel, Patrick Schick to get as many chances as possible. He's already had the most shots on target of any player so far in the tournament. And if Czech Republic is going to try and upset the likes of Croatia or England and make it out the group stages, because it maybe does look like Scotland might not do it, I do think that it's really gonna be looking at how Czech Republic can unlock him in the best way possible, because he's a good player, yes, but he's definitely not without his flaws. He can go offside pretty easily. He's pretty physical. He's quick. He's strong, but he's not necessarily the most tactically aware. So how Czech Republic kind of shapes their tactics around him is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree. And when we talk about Scotland versus Czech Republic, I think Czech Republic maybe making it out of the groups is a really interesting prospect. But before we do, looking at England versus Croatia, a 1-0 win, fantastic. It's officially coming home. And yeah, it was just a great game. And it was one of those that was interesting because when the lineup came out, I think pretty much everyone in the country was like, this doesn't make sense. We've just thrown the game away. But to be completely fair to Gareth Southgate, it was specifically the players that people sort of expected to disappoint that won England the game. Raheem Sterling got the goal, and although he sort of had a couple of Raheem Sterling-esque fluffs in front of goal as well, throughout the game he was generally quite good at being a nuisance to Croatia's backline. Kalvin Phillips dropped a man-of-the-match performance, absolutely brilliant, and he was one of those that everyone was going, oh, do you need Phillips' hand right? Oh, should Phillips be... The entire nation's mood has turned around on Kalvin Phillips, you can tell that easily now. And Tyrone Mings is the other one that everyone was sort of had a little bit of a question mark over him, going, oh, he's got a mistake in him, and he had a really good game too as well. Obviously, the defence didn't have to do as much as you might have expected, but he was doing really well in getting the ball out from those back areas, and was really impressive. And then conversely, it was the players that you would have expected to sort of be more of a safe bet, like Harry Kane, that took more of a back seat in this game.
Yeah, true. I mean, Harry Kane was almost nowhere throughout, and it does worry me. I guess the main thing when I looked at the lineup was just that it didn't feel like an ambitious side, and that might be, I don't know, scathing for the players that were picked, but I just felt like we'd set up in a way that was potentially quite safe, in that we'd gone for a 4 at the back like we had played in the last couple of friendlies, which doesn't really suit the squad that we have. An aging fullbacks, Kyle Walker and Kieran Trippier, over all of the exciting talent that we have at left and right back. The two just pure defensive midfielders in Declan Rice and Kalvin Phillips. It looked on paper like that was going to be the case, but obviously, Kalvin Phillips got really far forward and was one of England's most progressive players. So I was definitely proved wrong in my assumptions when looking at the lineup. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it is coming home. I'm not disputing that. Confirmed. Croatia did not look very good. They weren't an exciting side to watch. They look old. They look like they didn't have any ideas. We won 1-0, which is a good result. But I still don't think that we've seen anywhere near kind of the exciting potential that we had, at least before the tournament.
I think that's really good, though, because I think there's two ways to look at that. Because for me, the fact that you had all the sort of people who you thought would do badly do well, and all the people who you thought would do well do not badly, but do sort of less of a sort of impact on that game, I thought was good for a number of reasons. For the first, I thought just good to see performances from those players. The other second thing is that it really stokes up some belief in Southgate. Obviously, we have a huge history in this country of everyone jumping down the managers and the players' throats and that having an effect. And also, the third thing is it means we have loads more in the back pocket. If this was a game that Harry Kane wasn't at his best and we still won, that means that's still something we can activate. Obviously, players like Grealish and Sancho or either of the left-backs didn't even come on. They didn't play, and Jude Bellingham only had a short cameo. So that, to me, is really encouraging because it sort of goes, right, well, we've beaten Croatia, which is on paper the hardest match in the groups without the use of any of those players or without any of those players playing at their best. That means we still have something to come out. Let's say we now play against Czech Republic in the third game and they've also whipped out a win against Croatia and are actually shaping up to be a bit of a dark horse. We can then go, right, okay, well, here's what you're not expecting. Jack Grealish, on you go. So I was really, really positive about it. My question to you would be, with regards to that, and indeed with regards to 11, do you now change the 11 that beat Croatia? Or do you stick to something that's a bit more familiar? Because for me, I would never have had Kalvin Phillips and Declan Rice in the same 11. But we've now seen that it works really well. Kalvin Phillips had a great game playing in that further forward role. So do you stick with that? Or do you sort of revert to conventional wisdom, which is you only need the one defensive mid?
I have no problem now with Declan Rice and Kalvin Phillips starting in midfield together. I think that's absolutely fine in my books. I think that I guess, we're going to have different challenges that we're going to face during the tournament. And at that point, I wouldn't mind seeing someone like John Henderson come in. I wouldn't mind having someone like Jude Bellingham with his a bit more dynamic play come through as well. So I just think it's nice that this is yet another option as a string to our bow that we can play with. I think the one thing that, in the same way that you're saying how you had like just a bit of a groan when Netherlands went 2-0 up and the commentator said, oh well, 2-0 is the most dangerous scoreline, and then it happened that they came back to level it 2-2. Raheem Sterling scoring the winner just made me really annoyed because he didn't have a good game and Jack Grealish should have been playing over him, and I worry that now he has cemented his place in this starting lineup.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable concern, but it can go both ways, can't it? It was his first goal at a tournament, so he could take that confidence and now have a really, really good performance, for the rest of this competition.
Well taken shot. He hit it straight.
No, it wasn't at all.
We got so lucky.
In some ways we did, in other ways we didn't. I was fortunately lucky enough to be there. I was just behind the goal when that Phil Foden shot hit the post, and had it been, an inch or two further inside, that would have gone in. Everyone in the stadium was off the ground, by the way, at that point when the ball was, which was fantastic. But I thought, on the one hand, the finish was lucky. I did also think that there were a few other things. Obviously, there was that Foden chance. I did think that, not to be get greedy about the win, I think we could have scored more goals if we had a dedicated set-piece specialist taking the free kicks. I know that's why Kieran Trippier was brought in as a left-back instead of either one of Luke Shaw or Ben Chilwell. But I just thought, especially if you have ones that are more central or on the right, which are less favourable to Trippier, on the left, sorry, that are less favourable to Trippier, I did just think it would have been nice to have, like, for example, a James Ward-Prowse involved, or someone that could just get the benefit of that. Because was it Mason Mount who took one quite late in the day, and it was a decent free kick, but it was like, that was a really good chance to score, and we won the game anyway, so it doesn't matter. Unless things do come down to goal difference, which they probably won't, but may. I just thought maybe that was the one part of our game that's missing, especially because you look at the squad that we have, and it's another thing, it's like between Raheem Sterling, Phil Foden, Jack Grealish, Bukayo Saka, if he gets any games, these are all players that get very frequently fouled in dangerous areas, and I think that, with the combination of a player that can bang in free kicks consistently, would just be deadly.
Yeah, you would definitely think so, and I almost would be happy to, like, if it had James Ward-Prowse in the squad and then bring him on for a free kick if there's in the last kind of 5-10 minutes and we need a goal. I agree with you. I think Mason Mount seems like a decent corner taker, but he's not gonna guarantee you goals from, say, like 5 set pieces from the edge of the box. Kieran Trippier is a decent finisher. He's definitely our best free kick taker in the squad, I would say, because everyone else is kind of. Reece James can hit one quite well, but there's nowhere near the kind of level of consistency. Marcus Rashford is another example of someone like James Ward-Prowse. So, yeah, it's disappointing that I guess none of these players can hit a good, consistent free kick. But
there's nothing we can do about it now.
Beggars can't be choosers. Like, we've got a great squad. We've got a really balanced squad. I agree with you that it would be a nice tactical touch, but I'm not unhappy too much about it.
No, I mean, it was a good win as well. And it's interesting you said there Croatia looked bad, because obviously the two sides of the story, obviously we're English, and, on the day you're sort of going, oh yeah, come on England, we're the best team in the world, and we've just beaten Croatia, who were in a World Cup final, so that means we're going to win the World Cup. But actually, this was not the Croatia that played at the World Cup. They did look a lot more tired, a lot older. I was sat there in the sun at the time it happened. It was such a hot day, and I was wondering if that was maybe part of it. Sort of just like the sun beating down on their backs and them sort of just being a bit sluggish, and for whatever reason, it was affecting us less. But yeah, they just didn't look anywhere near the level any of us were expecting. And it was one of those things that, in the moment at the game, because it was only ever a 1-goal margin, I was sort of sat on the edge of my seat because I was like, well, this is Croatia, like, it's 1-0, but they could turn it on at any moment. And they just never really did.
No, they didn't. And I think, I'm not quite sure really what was going on, but Brozovic didn't look like he was up to it. Luka Modric, an amazing player, was just very old at this point. Kovacic did not have anywhere near the sort of like dynamism that he's had this season for Chelsea. Perisic, off the boil. Ante Rebic looked like he was like, I don't know, fighting against nothing. And Kramaric, who I really like as a player, he's really talented. He's really interesting, unconventional forward. again, just look pretty dull. And then they don't have a very good defence apart from maybe Vrsaljko. So, yeah, I think if they were going to win anything, it would have been, I guess, 2 years ago. 3 years ago.
Yeah, it just was very weird. And it does make me think, because looking at this next game, Scotland 2-0 Czech Republic, if Croatia play like they played against us, and Czech Republic play like they played against Scotland, I could see Czech Republic winning. But looking at the Scotland game, I think it is interesting because obviously before any of the matches started, these two teams were both looking at this game as their most likely win, with the other two teams being us and Croatia, and potentially something to springboard off. A lot of people were commenting prior to our game against Croatia that if England lost to Croatia and Scotland beat the Czech Republic, it would line up perfectly for Scotland to knock out their long-standing enemies from the competition, which is like, you can just imagine that being an incentive that like really spurred them on, and just like an anxiety thing that just really held England back. So
absolutely.
Glad that didn't happen. But, Scotland were good in this game. They had the majority of chances, but the lack of a top quality finisher just really hurt them. And that's another theme that we'll see a lot with a lot of these teams. And part of the reason why I think, Spain are one of my choices, or both choices really, to go out in the group, is just the lack of a top quality finisher. Lyndon Dykes just did not have a great game. The Czech keeper, Thomas Vaclik, had a really good game, but I also feel like he would have been very grateful how many shots were shot directly at him. And I just thought the difference was Scotland had more chances, but no one who could take them well. Czech Republic had less chances, but Patrick Schick had a really, really good game. He took his header extremely well. And then obviously that second goal is the goal of the tournament, probably, curling in from halfway.
Yeah, an unbelievable shot. I mean, I still am baffled by it. Just to take that on at an international level is just unreal.
In the first game as well.
Yeah, you've got to give him some mad props for that one.
Because that goes wrong. I mean, he had scored earlier, but if that goes wrong, the manager's going to be giving you the hairdryer treatment. You might get dropped for game 2, especially if it comes back to like 1-1, because you've given away possession.
Yeah, true. I mean, it's in no way a smart move, but he backs himself.
I admire it. I admire the balls.
It was unbelievably talented. The way it curled in was so good.
It's like Czech Republic's other really notable Euros goal, isn't it? Or like it's any Panenka penalty you ever see. If a player pulls it off, you go like, oh, ice cold. But when it goes wrong, you're just like, well, you're a dick, aren't you?
You done messed up now. Yeah, true. So Scotland, I really want Scotland to do well. I like this side, but I just feel like they were missing one more good player, and I feel like to not have someone like Kieran Tierney in the lineup because of injury really just did a lot of damage to them. And I there were moments where I just thought they need that little bit of dynamism from the wing, and he just wasn't there. And I think that, as you said, this was kind of their best chance of getting points. And, they had their opportunities. They had a decent amount of possession, but they couldn't quite convert it. I mean, Czech Republic defended really well. They hit a low block solidly, and they were strong. Out wide as well, they've got two pretty solid wing backs in Jan Borrell and Vladimir Kufal. But yeah, I think I was a little disappointed just to see John McGinn and Scott McTominay not perform as well as we know they can do.
Yeah, it was one of those weird things where it was like Scott McTominay, I mean, I have mixed feelings about him, but, for better or for worse, he starts for Manchester United, and he looked out of his depth playing for Scotland, which is no disrespect to either McTominay nor Scotland, but that's a weird sentence, right?
You would think so, yeah. I mean, it's not... But again, I guess, Czech Republic do have a pretty solid midfield. They got Thomas Souček, who, we're fans of on the podcast. Vladimir Darida, again, who's really creative as a player. And Alex Crowell, who was pretty solid in terms of like balancing the side for quite a young player who's only 23 and relatively inexperienced before he came off. So, yeah, credit to Czech Republic, and it looks like Scotland might not win a game this year, which is sad. I mean, they've never progressed past the group stages in any Euros or World Cup in their history.
Yeah, it doesn't look like... I mean, if you speak to most Scotland fans, like, they've looked at this game of sort of the only route they had of getting out was winning this game and then using the momentum to beat England, and like pretty much all Scotland fans are like, yeah, we're out. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how representative this is of just, I guess, like mindset, but I was talking to a Scottish friend of mine, and he was saying, like, I might not be able to watch the England game due to like work, and I'm not that upset about it.
Yeah, because you're worried it might be like a bashing. Well, I mean, I suppose it's got to be a tough one when the opening game goes that poorly. Looking at Group E, the player that I've got to watch out for in Group E is actually a player from a team that lost their first game, and that is Poland's Piotr Zielinski. Poland did lose their first game of the tournament and didn't look very exciting in the first half, but for those who haven't seen it yet, because you might not have watched Poland-Slovakia on a Monday, I really encourage you to look at their goal. It's a really nice move. It's got several quick, clever passes. It's one of those things, if like Spain had scored it, people would have been going, oh, and that's the Spanish style. It was actually really nice. And I think Poland lost this game, not because they played particularly badly, but because of individual errors from two players, Szczesny for the own goal and Grigor Krychowiak for getting sent off. I actually think they looked really impressive for spells of this game, although so did Slovakia. And this is sort of tying into sort of, I think that both these teams could potentially finish above Spain. I think when people think about Poland's threats, it's all about Robert Lewandowski, and with good reason, but you've also got to consider who's providing him the service and who's going to be getting him those chances. And Napoli's Piotr Zielinski is the main man pulling the strings for Poland in the final third. He operates in the area behind the striker, connecting the midfield to the attack. He drifts wide. He was sort of on the left-hand side of the field for that first goal, knocking him in together, but he can also cross really well. He was third for assists in Serie A this season and one of the standout performers for Napoli. So I think if Poland are going to turn it around and get something out of this competition, I think he's going to be, again, one of the big reasons why and one of the big players making a difference. Their next game is against Spain, which is a colossal game because the loser of that game is probably out of the tournament. And, you heard it here first. Zielinski to Lewandowski to win 1-0.
Oh, that is a hot take. See, okay, I'm gonna change my hot take to be what I think is going to happen, which is Lewandowski makes a really good dummy run to allow Zielinski the space to head home for the winner.
Either or.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I mean he's been on a lot of people's radars for a long time. Zielinski, he's 27 now, and he's had he's been linked to the Premier League for a long time, and he just does have it all. He's a really strong, combative number 8 that is great at passing. He's just
What's interesting is he normally plays. He normally plays, as you said there, in the 8, sometimes as a 10. But Poland have been playing him a lot, either on the left side of attack or on the left side of a midfield 4, which has been really interesting to sort of see how he adapts that, and did do that well in this game.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of makes sense just because like his goal scoring threat has always been better than his defensive attributes. For people that are fans of the Serie A. So I guess I understand why you would do that. He doesn't really strike me as a traditional winger, but it makes sense for him to be in that final third as much as possible for a team that is going to need to score goals because their defence is solid if uninspiring.
Yeah, there's a couple of the established names there, but it's not something you're thinking like they're going to put in a legendary display. It was a little bit disappointing for them this game because they looked like they were going to fight back to a winning position until Krychowiak was sent off. But I think Slovakia played really well. I think they played with a really high level of intensity, particularly down the wings. They were offering threats throughout the first half. I was sort of just like, I did not expect this from them at all. It's kind of interesting because a lot like Group D, where the Czech Republic are the top of the group, this is the team that sort of conventional wisdom is that they're the worst team in the group, and yet they're at the top of it. Which obviously, it's only the first game, but you only play 3 games.
This is true. Anything can happen. There's a real magic of the cup element to that, isn't there? It's kind of like anything can happen over 90, 180, 270 minutes. But it's going to be a fun group to watch as well, just because we're now committed to, I guess, like hoping that Spain don't progress.
Sorry to any listeners who live in Spain, by the way. You're just going to get raw dogged for the last hour.
Yeah, it's been a tough one. Spain had a tough role this week. Didn't look very hot. Sweden defended well, and they just didn't really have a lot of ways to try and break them down. And what worries me is that in the same way that whenever you see like a team go on a good run and then get halted in the Premier League, for example, all other teams just really carefully analyse that game and go, all right, well, where were they unable to get broken down, kind of thing. And I can really see just Poland and Slovakia going, well, this is what Sweden did, so we're just going to do the same. And I really don't know how Spain beat that, unless they maybe have learned their lesson and they do start someone like Moreno, which makes it a different outlook up front.
The problem with Spain at the moment, though, is that in this game, and I agree with you, a lot of other teams in the group will be looking at this and going, okay, so this is what we need to do. With Spain at the moment, because of the guy they've got up front, Alvaro Morata, you don't even need to stop them creating chances. You just need to limit the quality of those chances. Because some strikers, they get the ball anywhere and within 20, 25 yards, there's a chance for it to be a goal. Alvaro Morata, he's got like well, he's like the OG Timo Werner in a way. It's sort of like anything short of an open goal, you just don't trust him to do it. And I think that makes your life a lot easier if you're a defensive side, because you don't have to completely keep them out. You just have to make sure he doesn't get into a favourable angle. I thought Sweden were pretty impressive defensively, but as we mentioned earlier, the real star was Alexander Isak. He was almost my player to watch, but he did win Young Player of the Year in La Liga. So I thought, is that enough of an obscure one?
Does that count? Yeah, for
does
sure.
that count? But he was absolutely fantastic. 21 years old, just looks like he could go on to do great things. And he scored, I think, 17 goals in La Liga this season. Came into this game, looked really good, even though Sweden didn't score. He had an effort cleared off the line. He was a real nuisance the whole game. So he's another one that I could see Sweden potentially going further than people think in this tournament, because they've got a solid basis to build on and then a little bit of excitement up front.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a pretty comprehensive review, and a very talented, exciting player. I mean, 17 goals at his age is so impressive in the top flight of Spain. But yeah, it's interesting that you didn't feel like you could pick him for your player to watch, because we move into Group F, which is the group of death, and one littered with players that we know all too well about.
Yeah, so I suppose you've got there. Who have you picked that is not from Hungary that no one really knows about?
I mean, kind of like pick a name, really. It's tricky. I could have picked someone from Hungary. I think, actually, while we've been talking, Portugal have just won 3-0 against Hungary. And interestingly, all 3 goals came in the last 6 minutes, which, again, a trend that we picked up on earlier.
The floodgates
but
opening.
I just don't feel like Hungary have enough about them to make it out the group. So I've looked at the other 3 teams. I could have gone for Rafael Guerreiro. That was one player that I thought may not be as much on English football fans' radars. But I think that the main player I'm going to pick is from the Germany side, just because I think he's going to be really key to, again, whether or not they do well. It's someone that we talked about on the podcast a little bit before for the Champions League. It's Kevin Volland.
Yep, makes sense. I mean, that's a good a place as any, really, because unlike the other groups, these matches haven't all been played yet. So just looking sort of at who's going to come out on top in this, let's start with Germany, because you talked about Kevin Volland. I think that it's definitely true he's going to be really important. Their squad only has 2 listed forwards, one of them being Kevin Volland and the other being Timo Werner.
Good man, Timo Werner. And yeah, he's coming off the back of a really prolific season in Liga for Monaco. He's got 16 goals, and crucially as well, 7 assists. Germany is a side that, I think Thomas Müller came out, I'm sure you saw it, and said, we don't have any players that have won Ballon d'Ors, but we've got 3 World Cups. So,
4 even.
4 World Cups. This sense of, the collective team being stronger than the sum of its parts is crucial to Germany's just whole ideology. And someone like Kevin Volland, who is a really solid team player, is going to be key. And as you said, they're going to have to rely on him, because they don't have many forwards, and definitely don't have many forwards that will be consistently banging the goals in up top. I mean, he's 28. He's coming into the prime years of his life. I think he fits in really well with Germany's outfit, Germany's dynamic. I think he's going to really benefit from having the likes of Thomas Müller playing off him. And I just think that he's really going to be the focal point up front for what could be a little bit of a surprise package again, because not much is being made of Germany's chances, really, that I would say that I've seen, at least until the start of the tournament.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think the striker thing is interesting because they have, I think, played Muller a few games there in the previous friendlies and Serge Gnabry as well, but neither of them are sort of an actual proper striker, which you normally need to do well in these tournaments. But I think, Germany is interesting because Germany seem to have been quite a popular choice for a team to go out in the groups, sort of like a rogue shout. And I think a big part of that is because the last major tournament they were in, the 2018 World Cup, they got knocked out in the groups then. They've lost loads of their key players that brought them success in the 2014 World Cup, from Lahm to Schweinsteiger to Ozil, Khedira, and et cetera, et cetera. There's so many of them. And it is, again, hard to look past the fact that, Timo Werner is on the fringe of that side. If he gets started, he's not going to be a great asset. But I just think that people are writing off Germany too easily. Like, people keep saying that, that golden generation of players is gone. And it is. But the squad is still stacked with talents. Like, if you look at how many players in that team are Bayern Munich players, Müller, Gnabry, Kimmich, Manuel Neuer, all amongst the best players on the continent, Bayern Munich are still an elite European side. So I agree that Germany might not be as strong as they were back in the day, and obviously it is a very, very tough group. But I think people are writing them off quite easily, and we'll have to see how they play this evening. But it seems weird to me that people are so ready to dismiss them.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think they probably will have quite a good tournament. I think there's maybe just a general sense, and I could well be wrong. I'm sure I will be. But I think Kevin Volland, as you mentioned, Thomas Müller has started up front quite a lot for them, and I do think that could well be their default, at least to start with. But I think that as a player to watch out for, someone that can really have an impact off the bench, someone that they could come to, incorporate a lot more as the tournament progresses, he'll be a fun one to watch out for.
Definitely. Looking at one of the next teams in the group, France, the current world champions. Surely by that metric, they'd be favourites of the tournament. They've got the one thing that I think France have got going against them is that when you look at their squad, a lot of the players have had slightly disappointing domestic seasons. They've obviously got a large France PSG representation. They've got Karim Benzema, who played at Real Madrid. They've got players who have played at Barcelona as well, and Griezmann. And a lot of these players have sort of had a bit of a disappointing domestic season. But on paper, the squad is still really stacked. And this is basically the squad that won the World Cup with the addition of an informed Karim Benzema. So in theory, that's only going to improve them. And N'Golo Kante's come back fit for the end of the season and reminded everyone in the world that often Kante's involvement alone in a side is enough to turn them from silverware hopefuls into tournament favourites. So there's a lot to like about France, obviously. But the one thing, and this is very sort of Didier Deschamps' France squad, is that there have been rumours of discord within the squad. Apparently there's been a feud between Olivier Giroud and Kylian Mbappe brewing after the last friendly game. Some have said this is being blown out of proportion. Some have said this might derail France, which would be so France at a big tournament for that to happen. But how do you feel about France in this?
I think that's really going to be the only way in which they can slip up. I think the main thing is, I just think that midfield duo of Kante, as you mentioned, being so impactful, and just his relationship with Paul Pogba, there's so much love there.
I thought for a second that you weren't going to mention a second player. The midfield duo was just Kante.
Don't tempt me.
That midfield duo of Kante.
To be fair, he does have the presence of at least two players, as has been said many times. But just the way that he allows Paul Pogba to really try and dominate the midfield is so crucial to France's success. That yes, obviously Giroud having a tiff with Kylian Mbappe is going to be damaging to them, but the fact that they have Benzema instead to start, hopefully it's not going to impact them too much. But it's something that it's just sad to see, because we've seen it all too many times. I remember when I was first starting to get into football, I can't remember if it was, you might know better than me, was it the 2004, 2006 tournament where a bunch of French players just refused to join up with the squad?
I don't. Surely that wasn't 2006 because they were in the final. So presumably 2004.
It was people like Anelka and I can't remember. But
it's been a thing that's happened to the France football team plenty of times in the past. Always stacked with talent, but also like a lot of grumpy superstars, and a lot of people have sort of looked at this Mbappe thing and sort of worried that maybe Neymar's had a bit of an influence.
Well, perhaps. We shall see. But I still think France. You gotta still think of them as favourites. They just have such a strong and well balanced unit. Not just the starting 11, but also who they have to back them up. Even players like Corentin Tolisso, Moussa Sissoko, Kingsley Coman doesn't even make the starting lineup, and he's one of the most exciting players in the whole tournament. So Wissam Ben Yedder as well, who's had another great season. So
they've got quality.
They're going to be a great team to watch.
The other team that have sort of France are the current world champions, but the current European champions are, of course, Portugal. And to add insult to injury, they beat France in the 2016 Euros final. And you looked at that Portugal side at the time, and it was such a bizarre, it was sort of like Ronaldo and friends. And it was Eder who scored the winner, and it was one of those really bizarre things. They finished third in their group, and it was the first year that rule had changed to allow people to go through. So they really seemed like just like a bizarre team to have won it. Since that tournament, the team has got way better. Now they have players like Ruben Dias, Bruno Fernandes, Diogo Jota, Bernardo Silva, Raf Guerreiro, as you mentioned. It's a mouth-watering sort of quote-unquote supporting cast for Ronaldo. Loads of these players are top talents. And then you've got really exciting prospects with a point to prove, like Renato Sanchez, who's had a bit of a new lease of life this season over in Ligue 1, or João Felix, who is sort of trying to get back into the hype that was surrounding him before he moved to Atletico Madrid. So, yeah, it's one of those squads, again, that on paper is just exceptional. We started recording before they kicked off, but as you said there, they've kicked it off with a 3-0 win against Hungary. So, yeah, they're another team that's hard to look past.
Definitely. I mean, they're actually a team that I have placed a cheeky bet on before the tournament starts, just because I thought that their odds were not as good as their chances to win, because they just have a great squad. And the main thing is, for all of their, as you mentioned, kind of incredible attacking players, they've got some great holding midfielders as well. They've got William Carvalho, Ruben Neves, Danilo Pereira, Joao Moutinho. As you said, is Renato Sanchez a defensive midfielder? He's more of an attacking midfielder, but they just got a real strong balance.
Loads of great players, and yeah, the great midfielders, great forward players, the best centre back in Europe this season.
Yeah, exactly. So they're going to be a tough outfit to beat for sure.
I think if France are favourites, then Portugal are probably second favourites. And it's weird that they're in the same group, but they can both get through, obviously. All three teams can get through from this group. And you wouldn't be necessarily completely surprised. Looking at the last team in the group, who I really want to have like a hot take about Hungary and be like, they have loads of solid performers, and Peter Kulaski and Willy Orban both play for Red Bull Leipzig, and that's going to be a good sort of axis of chemistry. But Hungary, I mean, number one, they're in this group, the hardest group in the tournament. Number two, their best player, Dominic Szoboszlai, is missing out on this tournament. I just feel like they've been dealt the toughest hand possible.
Yeah, they are going to have a rough time of it. It's just not going to be, fun at all. What we can really say about them, other than the fact that, they're really going to have to turn up, and maybe it's going to be quite a refreshing thing, which is that they can probably say, like, we have no expectations to even win a game, so let's just go for it with everything we have. They could be, in a way, maybe quite a refreshing side, in the way that I always feel like goalkeepers have, like, maybe a little bit of enthusiasm to try and save a penalty, because they can't lose if they don't save it. It's not really their fault.
That's very true. And I caught the first sort of 20 minutes of the game, and they were defending really well. It was 0-0 until up about 75, 80-ish minutes, I think, or something like that. And they were apparently defending very, very heroically, which is, great to hear. You were like, could they get a point from this? Could they maybe even nick a goal? The fact that it's then gone to 3-0, I'm just like, were they like the little engine that could, and this has just broken their spirit, and then the next game against France or Germany is going to be like 12-0. Because all the teams are like, well, the only way to guarantee that all three of us get through is to bully Hungary.
Well, I mean, you never know. You really do hope so, not don't you? Yeah. It's great that they're in the tournament, and it's going to be fun to, I guess, hopefully see them maybe get a point if they can. They do have a couple of decent players in there, and they've got some good sides domestically, so there's no reason why they couldn't produce a solid showing. They've got a couple of Ferencvárosi players on the right hand side who will link up well, and as you mentioned there, a couple of good RB Leipzig players. So it's going to be fun. Fingers crossed for them.
Fingers crossed indeed. I think that about wraps it up for this episode, unless there's anything I've missed.
Cam, I think we found everything that we have to talk about so far. But, constant stories developing, and it's going to be pretty fun to watch it unfold. I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about next week.
We certainly will. Thanks again, guys, for listening. Thank you for a year of the podcast, and we look forward to bringing you loads more exciting stuff in the years to come.
Thank you, guys. Much love.
Cheers, guys. Bye.